So as Shannon mentioned, I am with the Department of Commerce. We have a very small office of 2 people called the State Energy Office, which I house out of. And essentially it's my role to be the state's wind girl. And I do have the car tag to prove that if you would like to see it. Shannon has seen it. So if you see someone driving around with a car tag that says wind girl, that's me. I've known wind basically my entire life. Despite the fact I grew up in Texas, I did make the smart decision to come here to Oklahoma and have just loved living here and have gotten to be a part of this industry pretty much since it was born in Oklahoma. And I'm very, very fortunate, and it's really, truly my passion. So we talk a lot about wind, but I also want to let you know that there are some different sizes of wind. We have a tendency to focus on the big turbines that we see, things that OG&E is doing, things that utility companies are doing, but a lot of times people do forget there are 2 other different sizes. Of course, a lot of what is utilized by you guys possibly out on your land is in the smaller range. You know, you're used to using it, the wind chargers and whatnot for water production. Possibly these applications can also be used to help aid in irrigation pivots. So small wind turbines are certainly an option for people in Oklahoma. It runs usually up to about 10 kilowatts and again can run anything from water pumping to irrigation to actually running your home. There's also an intermediate size, and actually a very, very good example of an intermediate size is right out back of this campus. As you head out today, kind of look out to the north side and you're going to see an intermediate sized turbine. The turbines can run anywhere from 50 to 250 kilowatts in size. So a 10 kilowatt turbine is about the size that can run your home. An intermediate, this 10 to 250 kilowatt size might run, say, this campus on occasion. We actually have one in Guthrie. There's a 100 kilowatt turbine installed in Guthrie that's helping run their wastewater treatment facility. And so you see applications like that that are a little bit larger than a home, but smaller than serving a larger scale utility need. And then of course there's the turbines, what we call utility scale large ones, like Mike just introduced. And I can't remember if Mike told you a good frame of reference for how much power these turbines put out. My favorite, when I was working in wind development, my favorite question that I would get from landowners as I'd be sitting down at dinner with them or drinking coffee and eating pie would be, well, you know, you can pay me a little bit less on my lease, just let me hook up my home and my barn to the wind turbine out back. And so I was like, well, have you ever seen National Lampoon's Christmas Vacation? When he puts all the lights on the house and, oh, what's going on? You got all these powers going in. Imagine that times 10. A single one of the large turbines that you see out here typically powers about 300 homes total. So to kind of give you a frame of reference for the size and the power output that they do. So that's why I would tell my lawyers, I was like, unless you really want to look like National Lampoon's Christmas Vacation, which I really don't think you want to do out here, it's best that we just actually pay you a little bit more, and we'll see about helping you out some way else with your electricity needs. Turbines are getting bigger, just as Mike alluded to as well. Turbines have been growing over time. So you see kind of in the early 80s, a lot of people think wind power, hear wind power, and you either think the wind chargers that we've seen out pumping water for the cattle, or you think of California, where you see lots of turbines on these lattice towers, which are smaller in size. As technology has evolved, they've grown larger and larger. 1.5 megawatts, so a turbine that can power about 300 homes, has somewhat become the standard. And as Mike alluded to, we're getting bigger and bigger into about 2.5 megawatts to almost 3 megawatts in size. Again, think of it like a light bulb in a way, is about the best analogy that I can think to make, and hopefully Mike as an engineer will not shoot me for making that analogy. But essentially you just have different power options, just like a 10, a 25, a 50 watt light bulb. It's same with the size of turbines, it's just that it powers that much more homes. So you often hear the fact that the US has the best wind resource in the entire world. This is the map that proves it. What you're looking at right here is an actual global wind resource map. So as you can see, this is where we say when the wind comes sweeping down the plains in our song, it's very, very true. Now granted, outside of some very far north, which you know only penguins and seals live there, as well as down here in South America, we really truly, as far as where population is concerned, where we actually live, where people actually live, we have a very unique wind resource. That same geography that causes us to have tornadoes and the change in weather that we see that we just take for granted and are used to. I can't tell you, my brother just moved here from San Antonio. His wife's in the Air Force, and so they're now stationed at Tinker. He called me last night and said, what the heck happened? How did it get this cold outside so fast? I said, welcome to Oklahoma. It's 85 one day and it's 30 the next. So that same type of geography that brings us the hailstorms that we have, the tornadoes, and the weather that we just know as normal also creates the wind. It's the flat nature of the fact exactly what we've experienced in the past 24, 36 hours of that Canadian air coming down. The wind literally comes sweeping down the plains, and it's there for us to take advantage of. This is essentially the same representation. Of course, you've got different companies that want to put their own different colors on it, but just a little bit closer in view of in the United States. So this one is done by the Department of Energy, and these two were done by two private companies using their own unique, fun, fantastical models that will make my head hurt very much. But essentially, as you can see, where Oklahoma is situated, we are truly in the prime wind resource area, even in the United States. So what does that mean for us as a nation? Essentially, at the end of 2011, we've got about a little over 46,000 megawatts installed. That's quite a bit of power. You know, that's several million homes that can be powered in the United States, and this is across the entire United States. We are not the world leader as far as installed capacity. It is a country that I probably wouldn't dare mention, but it is China. And that's just because of the industrial items that they are doing, and they're just installing at a very fast rate. But we are second in the world. We've got a lot going on. There's a great deal of construction. If you've been remotely near I-35 or driving even in between here in Woodward, you've probably seen turbine blades go by recently. And that's just as we are working to install a great deal of projects by the end of the year before the production tax credit expires. So when you hear talk about the production tax credit, literally speaking, in order for companies to take advantage of that tax credit, power must be delivered. That farm must be operational and delivering power to the utility customer, so to OG&E, to Western Farmers, to Oklahoma Municipal Power Authority by 11:59 p.m. on December 31st. So everyone's really working 24/7, especially as we're getting into this latter part of the year to get those turbines up and going. As you can see, we've got close to 9,000 megawatts under construction and should be installed. Some will just naturally slip. I don't think anyone thought that 14 inches of snow was going to come to North Dakota in October. I mean, geez Louise, it's even hard to account for that. I think even though we look at the almanacs and see how it's set to be a really hard winter, you still can't account for the day-to-day possibilities that come up. So some of it may slip. But if you take a look at where Oklahoma falls, we are always in the top 10. Currently, we're 8th in the nation as far as the amount of installed wind power, and that's really incredibly fantastic. Texas is its own country. And I can legitimately say that. I grew up there, I was raised there. They instill that in you from kindergarten. From the time that they teach you Texas are Texas, and between the stories of the Alamo and David Crockett and David Bowie, and they're on their own power grid, for crying out loud. So when Governor Perry said they were going to secede a couple years ago, legitimately they could. But the size that Texas is essentially accounts for the amount of wind that they have installed. But Iowa, California, Illinois, Minnesota, other leaders essentially put some policies in place, which I'll go into in a second. But again, where we sit, 8th in the nation, we have been ranking among the top in the nation as far as rate of installed capacity as well. So the fact that we're continually at a good steady rate, putting some in each year, I think is a much better indicator of where we sit in Oklahoma. It means that we're dedicated to seeing it done. I'd much rather see 300-400 megawatts each year kind of just going along rather than seeing 1,000 megawatts here and then none the next year. That makes more sense. It makes more sense for the electrical grid, for people like Mike at OG&E who are working to balance it on their system, and it makes more sense for us as citizens of Oklahoma. Another measure, so you can look at the actual total installed megawatts that we have. So in Oklahoma, we currently have 2,321 megawatts of installed wind power, a little over 1,200 turbines in the state. The second measure is how much of the electricity that you receive, of that's finally kicked in that coffee maker back there, how much does wind power provide to our electrical generation? And in Oklahoma, the end of 2011, we were at about 7%. I can tell you as of last week, we're at 14%. So 14% of the electricity being generated in Oklahoma is coming from wind. That's incredible. That's absolutely incredible. I mean, that is going to be among the top 5 in the country. It's really fantastic to see that. And as you can see, despite the fact that you have, Texas and California that might actually physically have more turbines in the ground, again, I think a better measure of success and how well it works in the state is the fact that we have that higher amount of wind providing power in the state.
Does your figure include the power that we're shipping out of the state to other states?
Okay, so the figure, does it include, I'm going to repeat the question because Shannon told me to repeat it since we're recording and everything. So does that figure include power that's being shipped to other states? Right now, no. That purely represents what Oklahomans are receiving as part of Oklahoma generation. There is only one project right now, which is up north near Enid, that's going to Alabama. And so that's being actually physically shipped out of state. So no, that actually represents all that's in Oklahoma right now. So
when you have that power going out of the state, will you still separate out how much is kept in Oklahoma?
Yes, we would still separate out how much is being served in Oklahoma whenever we look to increase what's being done out of state. For instance, one of the major projects being worked on right now is called Clean Line. Clean Line Energy Partners is working on the Plains and Eastern transmission line. They are working on a DC long haul transmission line that will run from the Oklahoma Panhandle, approximately Guyman, over to Tennessee Valley Authority. And so what that will do is it's essentially going to serve like a tollway where power is going to come on out in the Oklahoma Panhandle. What we're hoping for is for it to be primarily wind, and then that power serve the east folks out east. So mainly in Tennessee, because Tennessee runs a great deal of coal. I was at the Governor's Energy Conference on Thursday, and one of the fellas said the people in Tennessee actually pay the most for their power and use the most power. So where Mike had said we were on average, we might use 1,000 kilowatt hours a month at our homes. Apparently people in Tennessee, the same homes, they use 1,600 kilowatt hours a month. So they not only pay more, but they also use more power. So our wind power can help them lower their prices a bit. So that's an element where we hope to see a great more deal go out of state. So those leaders, as we said, Texas, California, Iowa, you might go, Iowa? Yeah, they've got a little bit of wind, but aren't they a little far east? I mean, they're certainly not bright red as far when it comes to wind production as Oklahoma is. And what you look at, one of the elements, there's always multiple elements that come together in getting projects built. But one of the elements is a state policy. So where you see areas that had very early on developments take place, they actually put forth some rules and mandates that required that a certain amount of the electricity in the state come from renewable energy. We in Oklahoma, that doesn't work for us. You know, by golly, I don't like being told what to do, and that's just not because I'm an Irish redhead. You know, I don't think you like being told what to do. So that didn't work. We obviously have a philosophy that we want the market to take care of itself. What works in the market is going to work. What's cost effective, what's best for you as ratepayers, what's best for me as a ratepayer, despite the fact I want to see more wind, needs to take place. So we did actually a goal in Oklahoma. So rather than a requirement, we have a goal to meet 15% by 2015 of renewable energy. And as you just heard me say a few minutes ago, right now we're at 14%. By the end of the year, according to figures we're looking at, we should be actually at about 16%. So we're on track and we're doing good. Also part of the goal, I will say, energy efficiency is included in that. So a lot of what OG&E and some of the utilities are doing as far as demand side management. So working with you on turning off your lights, time of day pricing to where you might notice the hours from 2 to 7, you know, the prices are a little bit more to try to get you to wash your dishes a little bit later, do your laundry a little bit later. Those types of programs also count toward this goal. What people also don't realize is we actually have a fair amount of hydroelectric power in the state out in eastern Oklahoma. So that will also contribute as well. So, Oklahoma, and all these are pictures from Oklahoma. That's Blue Canyon, this is Weatherford, and this is, where is that? I can't remember where that is. Somewhere out west. Somewhere out west, western Oklahoma. Thank you, Shannon. Oklahoma does have the 8th best wind resource in the nation. So we are 8th as far as installed capacity, the actual amount of turbines that we have in the ground. But we are also 8th as far as potential. So how much wind power could we produce? How many turbines could we put in the ground? We have the 8th best in the nation when it comes to that. Conservative estimates show 13,000 megawatts of power could be produced in Oklahoma. Estimates are as high as 40,000 megawatts. Think back to what the national number is installed. We've got a little over 46,000 megawatts installed in the entire nation right now. We could have that here in Oklahoma, though that's a heck of a lot of turbines in the ground. To give you kind of another frame of reference for how much power that is, I heard yesterday, I think the whole entire state of Oklahoma, and I'll ask if Mike might correct me on this, I think the state of Oklahoma runs about 22,000 megawatts of power total. Shannon's nodding. Approximately, yeah, Mike's shrugging his shoulder. So everyone in the state of Oklahoma, we're all running our stuff, runs about 20,000 megawatts of power. To give you a frame of reference for 40,000 megawatts, Oklahoma is part of the Southwest Power Pool, so a group of states that kind of share an electrical grid together. It is a little bit of Arkansas, Oklahoma, Texas Panhandle, Kansas, Nebraska, a little bit into Missouri. The combination of those states, when we were having our 110-degree days, when we thought we were just on the brink of Hades outside, and everyone's running their air conditioners, everyone's just, you know, your iced tea is melting before you can even drink it outside. The amount of power that was used at that peak time, so when Mike and all the utilities are really trying to work to keep our lights on, that amount of power for all those states combined was about 50,000 megawatts. So really and truly, I'm sorry?
Are you saying per day or per?
Yeah, so like in an afternoon, what amount of power was needed at that point in time to ensure you could turn on your lights and still have your air conditioner on? And Mike's got his finger up to correct. Oh, for 1 hour. So it's for 1 hour. So I'm trying to give you guys, again, trying to give you that frame of reference to see exactly how much power that is, because there's a lot of numbers. There's megawatt hours, there's megawatts, all these different things being thrown around. So I'm trying to give you a practical frame of reference. It's a lot. So that's why we say, you know, realistically, how many turbines are going to get put in the ground in Oklahoma? I can't see the amount of turbines to carry 40,000 megawatts of power. I wouldn't want that from a visual perspective, and I love wind turbines to death. You know, I think there's going to be a nice happy medium We have 20 operational projects actually in the ground producing power. As again, it counts for actually a little over 1,200 turbines. And we'll be meeting that goal of 15% by the end of this year. So here's our pretty map of Oklahoma, our pretty colored map. So the darker the orange, the better the wind resource. The turbines represent where we have existing projects, and the little cranes represent where projects are under construction. This one actually flipped over last week. The Panhandle has seen its first project go operational as of last week, using the wind turbines and whatnot. So this should actually be a little wind turbine now. One of the things you will notice is the fact that we are going to see the majority of the development take place west of I-35. We've got the pocket here in Osage County, which is kind of on the southern edge of the Flint Hills from Kansas. You've got a few little pockets down here in the Arbuckle Mountains, but essentially, you've got hills and trees, and we go flat. Wind likes to be flat. So, yes, ma'am.
What is going to happen with the farms when the big oil pipe?
When the pipeline comes through? What's going to happen with the wind farms when when Keystone comes through? I like your optimism too, when it comes through. I like that, because we all want that for Cushing. What you're going to see is, and Shannon's going to go into this a lot more, and this kind of brings into a little bit of the discussion of how can wind and oil and gas play nice together? How can we coexist on the same property? And in a similar fashion, what they do is we work together to ensure obviously the concrete foundations for the individual turbines are going to have to be taken into account. So what will happen is they'll just know where that is and route around it. And so if you take a look spatially, you'll see as they take the tour how far apart the turbines are. You're going to see a pipeline is going to easily be able to go through that. They're just going to have to take into account where the underground electrical lines are. And so all that's taken into account when they actually site and plan everything. So it will not disrupt it. It will not keep it from happening. It might cause some zigzags to occur, but no different than, say, you allowing the pipeline on your land for that easement versus your neighbor not allowing it. He might just put his foot down and say, no, I don't want this on my land. So no different than that. It's all taken care of. So where are we going? Again, I mentioned this Plains and Eastern Clean Line. As we look to take the estimates on this, they're planning it in 2 phases to carry 3,500 megawatts each of power out to Tennessee. As we talked about too, we've got Chisholm View, which is actually being sold to Alabama, literally speaking. So it's an actual power purchase agreement as approved by the Utility Commission in Alabama to purchase Oklahoma wind, which is just awesome. So again, reports 40,000, that's a lot. Could we see 10,000? Yeah, I think that is possible. As you see turbines get larger, a 3 megawatt turbine is able to produce more power in a smaller footprint. It's going to have a higher tower, but you're going to basically, if you look at 3 megawatts versus 1.5 megawatts, you've got twice the amount of potential there than the amount of capacity there. So rather than having 2 1.5 megawatt turbines, you can have 1 3 megawatt turbine. So there are some potentials there for that to take place. So economic development, so commerce, I can't even say if this is our tagline anymore, to be honest with you, because we're kind of updating things. But of course, commerce, we're always interested in seeing, okay, how does this benefit you guys? What's in it for you? You're going to get your lease payments every year. What does Canadian Valley think? What's it mean for my grandkids' schools, for my kids' schools? And these are kind of the unknown numbers that people could forget about and what we're seeing. So what we have, so the National Renewable Energy Lab, this awesome place that I got to spend some time at in Boulder, Colorado. Oh yes, darn, Boulder, Colorado. It is a really fantastic, brainy, nerdy kind of analysis place. And they've put together some models to where we can plug in. We've got this many turbines, this many projects, this much operational capacity. What does that mean? So when you take a look at it, we're looking at about $1 billion every year on average, you know, could be give or take some, that's possibly being put towards actually keeping these projects going. You know, you're looking at 10 to 12 technicians per wind farm. That's actually, these are guys and gals living locally with their families here in your local communities, getting paid a salary to work on the farms. Different people, you know, different items that take place, the lubrication, the oils that need to be done, spare parts, all these types of items go into that. And it represents essentially about $4 billion worth of capital investment. So a good rule of thumb is about $2 million a megawatt per installed capacity. So for a 150 megawatt wind farm, you're looking at, it's taking $300 million to physically build that farm. That pays for the concrete, that pays for the rebar, that pays for those construction workers, that pays for the turbines to go into the ground. So, and that's not chump change, you know. And if you want to take a look and break it down even further, so from Keenan 2, in talking to actually the county assessor, because as Shannon will mention, one of the things, these turbines should be set at a commercial property tax rate, which should not be your responsibility. And so that should be taken care of. And so when the developers actually pay property taxes on the turbines and on this development, this is an example of a generalized breakdown that we're expecting to see. So Sharon Mutual School District is going to be getting $579,000 a year. Curtech getting $227,000. Look at EMS, $56,991. You could hire an extra EMS person to serve in your area, essentially with that. They might be able to buy a new ambulance. They might be able to buy new defibrillation equipment. County health, you know, so these are good. A lot is being talked about too with the oil and gas industry. And is wind ever going to be able to supply the amount of help, this amount of economic development the oil and gas industry does? No, we're not that big. We're not ever going to be that big. Wind will not ever be that big. But is it in addition? Is it something additional that can come into your local communities and that can help you out as far as payments that you might receive? Yes. I mean, the best, my absolute favorite landowners, actually two up in Kansas that I worked with. So if you ever go north of Salina, Kansas, there is a big wind farm off I-40 or off I-70 in Salina, Kansas. Go north about 15 miles. If you're ever up that way, have to go to Nebraska or something, drive through that Meridian Way wind farm. I had to work on that. And I had two absolute favorite landowners. First of which I worked with, ran cattle on his land, and was very, very concerned, naturally, and saying, well, how many less cattle am I going to be able to run by putting in, because we had proposed to put 3 turbines on his land. He was taking account into roads and, you know, the actual turbine footprints and everything. He was very concerned. And what I'm getting paid out of the lease going to make up the difference between losing the amount of cattle that I can graze on that land. I mean, that's pure cost-benefit analysis. That's logical. And his concern was the fact that because that income goes to his disabled sister. His sister was declared mentally incapable, and he runs that ranch and he runs horses out in Colorado to provide for her care. And essentially, he worked it out. This guy did financial planning at his day job. You know, ran the ranch, ran the farm on in the evenings on his spare time, and he found out it was about a 20% net benefit for him to have those turbines on the land. And I think he said, I can't remember the exact head of cattle he ran, but I think he said he had to run 3 or 5 less on the land that he was going to have to move to different acreage for the grazing. The second landowners that I absolutely loved working with, and I love this story, when I was working with them on their wind lease, and we were able to provide them turbines on their land, and they were very excited because they actually already had a stripper well on the land, and they were considering a natural gas well, believe it or not, as well. And when we came in and talked to it, and he was like, this is my perfect retirement scenario. He goes, you cannot get closer to portfolio diversification than to have a wind turbine, a stripper well, and then natural gas development going on your land. Because by golly, one of those is going to be producing for you, no matter what. So again, we don't see ourselves as competing with oil and gas. We just would like to be part of the energy family in Oklahoma. And this does provide economic benefits. Is it ever going to be, out the window and providing solely? Probably not. But can it help you out? Can it allow you to possibly acquire more land and put a little bit more into retirement? That's what we hope for. So I think I'm running ahead of schedule. I am happy to answer any questions. And so, yes, sir.
Could you say something about the long-haul DC transmission? How does that work?
Long-haul DC transmission, where'd Mike go? Mike's over there. I'm going to do it from a 50,000-foot level, which I know. Essentially, it works as a tollway. It's different than AC power, so it's a single flow. So essentially, electrons flow from point A to point B singly. Whereas obviously with AC, the alternating current, which we see, we have out here, it can flow both ways. So what will happen is, in the Oklahoma Panhandle, power will essentially get on. Think of it like a one-way turnpike, to where power will get on the system most likely from wind. I'm sure there's going to be some natural gas generation on that as well. There's going to be certain capacities, but we'd like it primarily to be wind. So the wind power produced at that, in the surrounding area is going to flow onto that transmission line. That power will then flow to Tennessee and then be utilized by Tennessee. Is that a good general representation, Mike?
With an AC line, you're going to tie multiple points together, so you cannot control the flow. With a DC line, you have to convert from AC to DC at Woodward. It will run all the way to Tennessee, and they'll convert it back so they can control the flow. And it will not tie to the grid anyplace else.
So you won't have like a little off-ramp. So like Enid or Stillwater or Tulsa won't be able to pull power off that line to be used for their needs. It's a single flow, like a large stream.
But the resistance to DC is not an issue?
DC actually is more efficient at transmission of high voltages than AC.
Oh.
But it costs so much to build a converter station at each end that AC is cheaper, considering the losses, to eliminate the converter station. There already is large high voltage DC lines going from Oregon and Washington down to Southern California.
Okay.
And those carry like the hydropower a lot of times.
Correct, but yeah, we're talking about 500,000 volts DC.
So it is the most efficient way to carry a large amount of power from a point to a point. And all of those losses are taken into consideration. All right, I saw more hands. Okay, she was first and I'll come to you, okay? Yes, ma'am.
What is the farm that you're thinking of as a program farm? Already in the program, government program?
Are you talking like CRP? Or like CRP program? That can already, Shannon, are you going to go into that in more detail? Okay, Shannon's going to go into that. It's not a problem whatsoever. What you do need to do is be proactive and get with the local office regarding your CRP contract. They actually have set rules now that account for wind development coming in. So if they do put it on the CRP program land, that will be taken out. There should not be any penalties. And if there are, the developer should pay for that. So that is something you definitely want to take into account. And then you want to make sure it's proportional. But the main thing is to get with your local office regarding your contract. And the rule, I know when I was working 4 years ago on this, even 4 years ago, the rules were set to, okay, a turbine takes out this much land, it's standard language, and they're removed from your contract. So it's not a problem whatsoever. So, but you just need to make sure all parties are aware. Make sure the developer knows when you're working with them on the leasing contract that this acreage is in CRP. And then vice versa. So don't sign anything until all parties know what's going on. But not a problem. All right, yes, ma'am.
Do you see the wind farms moving into more central and eastern Oklahoma?
To a point, yes, I do. I don't really see them moving into eastern Oklahoma too much. We'll go see if I can go back. I do see that, as you can see, even this one right here in Minco, and what we're getting closer to Oklahoma City, I think that's probably about as close to central Oklahoma as you'll see, basically just due to, it's purely due to the wind and what you have to take a look at. What wind projects want is a clear, unobstructed flow of wind. And the closer we get into the city, the more homes we get, the more commercial developments. You know, as we start moving 10 minutes east of here along I-40, you start to see more things pop up as far as buildings.
But like the area there in Creek of Buster County where it's pretty mineralized.
You know, it's all about that wind resource and all about access. So, and then access to transmission lines. And that's where you've seen development take place so far. Project development, when it actually takes to put a project together like this, imagine 10 balls in the air, and then you honestly have to get them to land in order from 1 through 10. And there's a lot of different steps that go into it. Wind resource, the fact that you've got good enough wind at your location, access to transmission lines, and frankly willing neighbors to put together the amount of land as you've seen. It can be anywhere from 10,000 to 40,000 acres contiguously, are 3 of the major elements that takes place.
Can I slightly modify that?
Sure.
It's not just the wind resource, it's the generation technology also. And the reason I'm saying that is 5 years ago, they wouldn't have thought about putting wind turbines at Kylah McNabb.
It's very true.
The new generation, new wind turbine technology makes them able to produce more from that site. So with the present technology we have today, don't see much more moving east. With new technology coming, it could move further east. It's a multitude of moving parts. And the other part, I don't think we mentioned too much is what's the price of fuel? What's the price of gas?
What's the price of coal?
Coal's not cheap. It's not.
For now.
For now.
Yeah. And so, well, and as
But I mean, the gas gets higher, then it makes wind more cost effective. So.
and as Mike said too, if you consider turbine heights, like he was saying, you know, we're getting a little bit taller. You might start seeing things at 100 meters, you know, the 80. The higher up in the air you go, the more unobstructed the wind is. The wind blows faster, and you've got less obstructions to it. So it's all these moving parts. So it's hard to say. You know, up here, you know, that's some open area. I actually remember in project development, there's actually a pocket out here on the other side of Tulsa that looks really, really good. And I could never convince my company to actually put wind measurement towers out there. But I think there's a couple areas out here as well that would work. Because again, you kind of judge, you've got your wind resource, which is a factor, but if you're closer to transmission lines, your wind resource might be able to be a little bit less if you don't have to pay as much to take it to the transmission lines, to actually get it on the system. So it really is this Rubik's Cube of, okay, I can increase this cost, but this one brings it down just a little bit more. It might be closer for me to bring in parts, or, you know, there's a lot of different moving parts. So to a point, yes. I think too far into eastern Oklahoma, I'm sorry, McAllister, Stigler, those areas, no, it's just not going to happen. I don't see remotely anytime soon. But in general, I think anything along the I-35 corridor here, I think is fair game. I really do. There's one over here, and then you, sir.
That clean line, transmission line
Mm-hmm.
that's being put in, what is the distance from that it would be feasible to, you know, how far away would be feasible to?
All part of that Rubik's Cube. I mean, I think that I can't give you a certain specific mile. I can't sit there and say within 25 miles, it's going to make sense to be part of that. But Shannon might do that.
One thing you have to think about with that, the Plains and Eastern project is, like Mike was saying, that's a DC line. So that DC line operates at its maximum efficiency when it goes from point A to point B and doesn't do anything in between. So really, the only collection points where power is going to feed into that line are at the end, out in the panhandle. So there's going to be nothing connected to it other than towers, you know, to get it over to Tennessee. So
Did you mean how far from the line to connect, or how close can you put a turbine to the line going through?
Yeah, right. So if there was a wind farm, say in Custer County, could it hook up?
No, I would say probably anything. I mean, even like Beaver, because this essentially it's going to be Hitchland or south of Guyman is I think where they're still setting. There's literally meetings taking place next week. One's going to be in Stillwater, which I will be in Stillwater on Thursday, taking place showing it. I can't see anything probably outside of 50 miles, I would say. But again, some of it might just be what the developer can pay to build a transmission line to carry the power from the wind farm into that injection point, into that starting point.
And another thing we should say is because don't mistake what we're saying as saying that wind farm can't connect directly to that line. Doesn't mean that line can't generate more interest in developing Oklahoma wind, because what developers can do is develop wind power projects that feed through our existing transmission system and new transmission lines into that Hitchland station and then send it back that way.
Which there is one that goes north and south out there, isn't
And more on the way.
Yeah.
So, yeah. Does that help you? Okay.
All right. Fella back there and then up front. Well, there's a fella behind you, sir, and then you.
If the incentives aren't renewed, what happens?
I look for a new job. No.
Yeah, I'll talk about that one too.
He's going to talk about this. I will give you my perspective, and this is going to be Kylah McNabb taking off my commerce hat, and I know I'm being recorded and on tape for this.
Should I stop the camera?
You might need to. No, you're fine. You're fine. There's a couple different items. Number one, there's a couple different things being talked about. Number one, development truly and honestly for the next 12, 14 months is going to go in the tank. For lack of better terms, not a lot will probably get done in 2013. And that is just because of supply lines being contracted and there just not being the interest there, just from a pure economic standpoint. So from there, there's two different schools of thought. Number one, you have a move towards renewing the production tax credit, either for 5 years and we start a cycle again, or a potential phase out, meaning let's renew it for 12, 14 months and then do a step down and eventually have it go away. The second frame of mind is that if nothing's going to happen, what's the industry going to do to adjust as far as financing and project development costs? The more I hear going towards the second realm, because there's a lot of talk of subsidies, and it's part of the competition between oil and gas. Oil and gas and wind, and oil and gas, like, well, we don't get any subsidies, we don't get any subsidies. Well, but you also get some accounting mechanisms that's not afforded to the wind industry. And there's some work being done to make essentially the similar types of depreciation and whatnot as far as accounting principles apply to the wind industry as well. That might also create essentially a new normal is what we're looking for. I can't tell you as soon as I know in my heart what I want the outcome of November to be, but it's too early to tell. It's going to depend on the outcome of November. It's going to depend on the economics. There's much bigger issues out there. Honest to goodness, even from a personal standpoint, there's other tax issues out there that I think need to be taken care of before the PTC. And that's just because it affects each and every one of us in this room, personally on our personal taxes. And I think those bigger issues are going to get addressed more so than a single tiny subsidy for one industry. So
It cannot operate without.
it can. It can in certain areas. Again, going back to pricing, what that helps, that subsidy helps the price essentially go from $50 a megawatt hour to $30 a megawatt hour. In our location, that helps. You want cheap power. I want cheap power. We have some of the cheapest power in the nation, and we're blessed with that. You know, Texas pays 11, 12 cents a kilowatt hour. We pay 8. So I see my parents' electric bill in Dallas-Fort Worth, and I just choke. I'm just like, that's my mortgage. So, you know, and we're lucky with that. But that's where a little bit of a double-edged sword comes in when it comes to wind power, in that we have amazing wind resource, which actually helps bring down the price of the wind power. but we also have a market to where we already pay relatively low electricity rates. So where I see some possibilities happening are like with Alabama and with this to Tennessee and getting sold outside the state. What the Alabama project has proved is that wind power is just another energy commodity that Oklahoma has. No different than oil and gas. That wind power can be sold out of state to serve out of state customers where the price is good for them. Yet we still have the jobs here. The investment comes here. You'll get turbines on your land. And so how much of that's going to happen? Who knows? Things will get done. Osage County is not going to get built by the end of the year. I can tell you that right now. So will that get moved into next year? Yes, it will happen. So things will happen. It will just not be, it'll be at 15% of what it's been in the past. And then, like I said, give it 14, 16, 18 months, and I think you're going to see a new normal come out. I really do have faith in the industry. There's a lot of really brilliant people in the industry, and several working here in Oklahoma, that are going to figure it out. And I think it's just because we've never been forced to figure it out before. I've been part of the industry 12 years. And we've had this happen before, but I've never seen talks of, okay, we've got to figure this out. We've got to get beyond this. We're tired of being the political football and saying, oh, you rely on this one little subsidy and it being used on every single Talking Heads program. Well, how dare you do this? So we want to move into the big leagues of being considered a traditional energy industry. That's what has to happen. Again, that's me personally. That's kind of what I see. That's what I think is happening. Who knows what's going to happen in December in lame duck session and everything else. So, and again, Shannon will go over it. All right, he's got a question, sir, and then we'll come to you.
What's the cost of one of those small turbines, you know, like for a home?
Yes, you'd still be connected. So for the smaller turbines, you're looking at anywhere from $25,000 to $40,000.
Bergie was saying theirs are 60 grand.
60? Ooh, that's gone up. Ooh. That's what Brent said. See, that's what I miss when I go to Minnesota. So about $50,000 to $60,000, we'll go with that. That's out of Bergie Wind Power. There is a 30% tax credit that is currently available for federal taxes that can be taken on that. They're going to have a lifetime of about 25 years. But yeah, about $60,000, I guess, is the new. Yes, and they do have small. That would be one that would serve your entire home. And again, you're looking at a case where it wouldn't necessarily be able to power your home 100% of the time, but in good times it would be able to. Sell back is not the right term. You'd receive credit. Right, Mike?
No.
No? Okay, I'm deferring to the utility on this one because he can best explain it. I always get this wrong.
That's what happens. I've been around OG&E so long, they keep moving me from department to department to department, figuring I can find where I can handle it. So I have been through some of these. We have a couple of different rates that we offer, and they're published on our website. And, okay, I'll get over here in front of the camera. Yeah, I know. I'm being framed. Yeah, nothing personal here. Don't slap me. Actually, if you go to OG&E, it tells you how to hook one of them up for us. We have a rate that if you wanted to just sell it all to utility, you can do that. And that rate is around 5 cents a kilowatt hour is what we pay. If you keep it behind the meter and use what you generate, then you avoid paying the retail rate. And if you're on our time of use rate, the retail rate in the summer from 2 to 7 is 23 cents. 7 p.m. to 2 p.m., it's 4.5 cents. And in the winter, it's anytime June to September is the summer. Any of the rest of the times are what we're calling the winter. It's around 7 cents. So you get a lot more for using all the power yourself because you're knocking off generation, transmission, and distribution cost. If you're in front of the meter, you are competing with central station power, and that's what you're being compensated at, so it's a lot lower. So the best thing is to use it all that you do, and if you put a little bit back in the grid, don't worry about it because it's not worth trying to chase.
This is why we have a utility guy in the room to help out with that. All right, he was there, and then you, sir.
Are you familiar with a company, I think it's called Iberdrola or something?
Yes, Iberdrola.
I have a little east, northeast of Greenfield. They've been measuring wind. I have a little hole up home for 10 to 15 years, for a long time, but as far as I know, no windmills. Are they a company that is producing electricity some spots?
In Oklahoma, no. In Oklahoma, they're not, but they are. That is one of the larger companies in the nation. It is one of the larger companies. They're very reputable. They're very, very good. It's just that, again, when I mentioned there's 10 balls that get balanced in the air, and this is from company to company, that you're on ball 3. And the Rubik's Cube hasn't come together for them to build here in Oklahoma yet. But they are one of the reputable companies.
Their leases are pretty close to that transmission line.
It's just a whole different set of factors. Okay, one more question, and then if you guys have further, and this fellow was there first, I'm sorry, I'll come talk to you after we get done here, okay? Sir.
What are the prospects for the southeastern Louisiana? We're from Durant area. And what are the prospects for anything that's happening out there?
As far as development to go in or more power being sold? Probably pretty slim. Anything that's going to happen in the near term is going to be where the better wind generation is going to be, which probably Ardmore-ish around the Arbuckle Mountains is probably going to be as close to come. And going back, if you want to look at the wind resource map that's in the books, as Shannon's showcasing there, you want purples? Or is that a purple or a red one?
Purple's good on this one.
Okay, the darker the purple, the better the wind resource is. And again, going back to the fact that the better the wind resource, the better the price of power is, because you can get more power out of the wind. So where I could see advantages for Louisiana is going to be in a similar situation to that of Alabama, to where I more would see projects getting developed here, maybe in central Oklahoma, central to western Oklahoma, and power being sold down to you guys for a better rate to serve you as ratepayers. Or offshore is a possibility as well, offshore of Texas and Louisiana as well. So, all right, I'm going to wrap it up here. I'm here, guys. Again, this is my direct phone number, my email address. I answer it pretty much anytime from 6 a.m. to 8 p.m. I'm here to help. I'm here to answer questions. I don't care what kind of question it is. This is what I'm here to do. This is what I love doing. And so I just really appreciate the opportunity to get to know you guys today. And again, I'll be around here. Time for my second cup of coffee, or else my husband's not going to want to deal with me when I get home. And thank you very much. I appreciate it.